Hello. I'm going to talk today about the ideas of free will and determinism in psychology. I've been reading the arguments by Andrew Dunn, Gary Young in this issue of Psychology Review, and actually I found them both convincing. So what I'm going to suggest is that there's plenty to agree with in both those arguments, but I'm also going to put a third position forward. So, I would agree entirely with the argument that the classic Libet studies that are supposed to show no free will by virtue of the fact that people's motor responses were measurably quicker than their conscious responses to decision making. So people were making a movement before they were aware they'd made the decision to make it. I think those studies actually are very, very overrated in terms of what they can tell us about free will. The reason being, just because we are aware of making a decision after the motor response has begun, does not mean we did not make the decision. The I that made the decision is still in there and it's still operating prior to the motor movement. It's just that the phenomenological experience that we then report comes later. So I think those studies don't necessarily have very much that's useful to tell us. On the other hand, I completely agree as well with Gary Young that there's nothing to be ashamed at in the idea that our behaviour, our decision making is influenced by factors other than free will. Clearly we all have experiences, we probably have genetic influences as well, and these things will affect the kind of decisions we make, and there's really nothing to be ashamed of in that. That doesn't make us any less sort of worthy human beings. But what I'm going to suggest is a slightly different position, and I'm going to take us back 100 years. And I'm going to look at the work of the man that most modern psychologists love to hate, Sigmund Freud. Now, Freud is often described as deterministic because he wrote a lot about the influence of instincts and the influence of early experience on our sort of adult decision making. However, Freud also placed a lot of emphasis on the idea of insight. And I think this is an idea that has stood the test of time, personally. So the idea in Freudian therapy, for example, is that we are powerfully influenced by our past, and these influences we're not conscious of. We can call them unconscious influences. However, once we gain insight into those, once the unconscious becomes conscious, then actually everything changes. Then at that point we become capable of making conscious decisions and we achieve a degree of free will. So there you go, Freud.